I do think that the Democratic Party is going to have to be a little bolder in how we describe our economic options going forward. Look, we all want free and fair trade, and you can argue about negotiations with China or take a tougher stance with Mexico or what have you, but the fact is, and the data just shows this, the jobs that are going away are primarily going away because of automation. That's going to accelerate. Driverless Uber and the equivalent displacement that's going to be taking place in office buildings all around the country is going to be scary for folks, which means that we are going to have to start thinking about where do jobs come from and how much government involvement is there in the marketplace. I think, probably have to be more creative about anticipating what's coming down the pike, because automation is relentless. The social compact has to accommodate these new technologies, and our economic models have to accommodate them. The good news is that's not going to happen overnight. Let's say that's a 20, 30-year process. If we're making good decisions now, then we can build the runways so that by the time AI is fully incorporated into our economic life, people welcome it as opposed to reject it. But we can't assume that. And if we continue on current trends, you're going to continue to see these populist movements, both on the left and the right, that believe that technology, globalization, AI, the guys who are off on their own, staring at a computer screen trying to figure this stuff out, that all of that is threatening to the day-to-day lives of ordinary people and the values that they cherish and notions of community. And we have to guard against that. That starts with making sure the economic implications are worked out.
It's actually, though, non-intuitive which jobs get displaced, because I would bet that if you had a computer that understood the medical system and was very good at diagnostics, the resident nurse or the pharmacist
is the least likely
to be and maybe the amount of school they have to go to is just a community college instead of medical school. And my rule of thumb is if the person looks like they're doing work that a robot or an AI could do, they're going to be more likely to displace. And there's actually a very high level jobs, maybe some categories of lawyers or auditors that might disappear, whereas a lot of the service businesses, the arts, I think that things that involve things that computers just aren't well suited for. And I think to President Obama's point, I think that we have some time, and I don't know what you think about universal basic income, but as we start to see people getting displaced, there's also this idea of work provides the structure for people, it provides the purpose. And so can we look at other models like academia or the arts where people have purpose or people who take care of kids at home? And can we somehow, because we don't calculate moms into GDP, it's crazy, right? So I think one of the problems is there's this general notion sort of on Wall Street, how can you be so smart you don't have any money, right? And now going into academia, I realize there are a lot of smart people with no money. And so I think that also this ties into the values of society, because as we start to see other work, that may actually be viable work. It just isn't viewed as work. Right?
Well, you're exactly right. And that's what I mean by redesigning the social compact. Now, whether a universal income is the right model, is that going to be accepted by a broad base of people? That's a debate that we'll be having over the next 10 years, next 20 years. And you're also right that the jobs that are going to be displaced by AI are not just low-skill service jobs. They might be high-skilled jobs, but ones that are repeatable and computers can do. What is indisputable, though, is that as AI gets further incorporated and the society potentially gets wealthier, that the link between production and distribution, how much you work and how much you make, gets further and further attenuated because the computers are doing a lot of the work. And as a consequence, we then have to make some tougher decisions. We already have this problem. It's not as hypercharged as it's going to be. We underpay teachers despite the fact that that's a really hard job that's really hard for a computer to do well, to replace a really good teacher. But we don't value teachers because it used to be primarily women's work, or because there are a whole host of reasons why we don't. For us to re-examine what we value, what we collectively are willing to pay for, whether it's teachers, nurses, caregivers, moms, dads who stay at home, artists, all the things that are incredibly valuable to us, but right now don't rank high on the totem pole. That's a conversation that we need to begin to have. And Joey's identified, I think, the ways in which this could be solved. But it's going to require, I think, a new way of thinking, and that's not going to happen right away.
There will be fewer and fewer jobs that a robot cannot do better.
Okay.
What to do about mass unemployment? This is going to be a massive social challenge. And I think ultimately we will have to have some kind of universal basic income. I don't think we're going to have a choice.
Universal basic income.
Universal basic income. I think it's going to be necessary.
So it means that unemployed people will be paid across the globe.
Yeah.
Because there is no job, machine, robot is taking over.
That's simply and I want to be clear that these are not things that I think that I wish would happen. These are simply things that I think probably will happen. And if my assessment is correct and they probably will happen, then we need to say, what are we going to do about it? And I think some kind of a universal basic income is going to be necessary. Now, the output of goods and services will be extremely high. So with automation, there will come abundance. There will be almost everything will get very cheap. I think the biggest. I think we'll just end up doing a universal basic income. It's going to be necessary. The harder challenge, much harder challenge, is how do people then have meaning? Like a lot of people, they derive their meaning from their employment. So if you don't have, if you're not needed, if there's not a need for your labor, how do you, what's the meaning? Do you have meaning? Do you feel useless? That's a much harder problem to deal with.
I wanted to start with the part of the book that surprised me the most, which was you almost ran on the beginning of a universal basic income in America, what you were going to call Alaska for America.
Right.
Tell me a bit about that idea and why it didn't make it into the final campaign.
Well, I wanted very much to convey a commitment to trying to figure out ways to raise incomes. I mean, most of the emphasis in the campaign was, as you know, on jobs and some big projects like really the infrastructure program that I put forth. But I was also really interested in what else we were going to be needing to do. And so I looked at a couple of different approaches to what's called UBI, Universal Basic Income, you know, the experiments that have been tried elsewhere. And the Alaska for America idea was really intriguing to me because, in effect, it was to argue that our natural patrimony really does belong to every American, to try to break the mindset that, you know, the extraction of resources is a totally private sector effort, that we as Americans have a stake in it for all the reasons that you can understand. And the Alaska model, where they write a check to every single Alaskan every year based on a formula about the oil and gas revenues, was really intriguing to me. And we dug deep and we tried to explain it to some people, and it just was hard for people to grasp what we were talking about, because most Americans in the lower 48, as we like to say, didn't have any idea about what was going on in Alaska. So I kept looking for an opportunity to put it in, but not to make it a centerpiece of the campaign.
What would have gone into a program like that? When you talk about our natural patrimony, what
Right.
would have been the inputs to that income?
Well, that was one of the challenges we had trying to figure out exactly when you look nationwide. Are we talking about fossil fuels, which then might sort of perversely encourage the continued extraction of fossil fuels, which would be an outcome that we weren't necessarily thinking was in the best interest. Other kinds of natural patrimony, whether it's minerals or anything else that you could look at and say, extracting that, making a private profit off of that is really part of America's legacy. So there were lots of really interesting questions. We debated it for a very long time. The fossil fuels, climate change issue was one of the complications.
So the reason I start with that is that when you talk about it in the book, you say at the end, maybe I should have proposed that and left the details to be worked out later.
Yes.
And it seems to me that this is one of the pieces of the campaign that you've been left reevaluating.
It is.
That you say that you now have more of an appreciation for the power of big galvanizing ideas.
We had earlier this week Andrew Yang here, and he talked a lot about the displacement due to artificial intelligence and automation. And he has proposed this universal basic income, which he described here as a way to give people the freedom and cushion so that if they aren't fully employed, they can find a way to move on. What do you think about that proposal?
I read his book, and he convinced me. I did more research having read that book, and he's absolutely right. We have a tsunami on the way. There are 9 states, for instance, in the United States, in which trucking is the primary industry. So let's say somebody's been a trucker for 4 decades, and then what happens is what, in fact, is going to happen. We're going to have driverless trucks. What is that trucker supposed to do? I mean, this is an industry after industry after industry. And the more you read up on this, the more you realize that a lot of us who might think, oh, well, my job couldn't be replaced by automation. Don't kid yourself. No person should live only for themselves, and no generation should live only for itself. We have such short-term thinking in pretty much everything regarding our public policy. We need to think about what's coming down the road 10, 12 years from now. That's why I agree with him about universal basic income. I'll tell you who else wanted a universal basic income, which is a fact that just blows my mind. Milton Friedman, the main articulator of trickle-down economics. He himself said, none of this will be safe without a universal basic income. The idea of a universal basic income is not something new, and I agree with Andrew. Also, I want to say something else. I have mentioned here already today that I believe that all domestic and foreign policy should be built around the core principle, what would help people thrive? Tense, anxious, stressed people are not at their best. They don't have time and energy and bandwidth to be there for their lovers, for their friends, for their partners, for their children who want mommy or daddy to read a bedtime story to them before they go to sleep at night. They don't have the bandwidth or the energy to be there for their children and to really participate in family dynamic the way they might. They don't have the happiness and the stress-free ability to be good employers and to be good employees. This is the genesis of societal dysfunction. This is the genesis of societal malfunction. And malfunction is what happens when dysfunction has become so badly that you're talking about self-destruction here. So anything that helps people thrive allows people greater access to their own creativity and productivity. That's where money comes from. We need to throw away bad economic ideas that are holdovers from the 20th century. Money is not produced by a bunch of corporate aristocrats who drop crumbs from their table in the form of job creation. Money is produced by people spreading their wings, living their dreams, manifesting their God-given potential, being their creative and their productive best.
Autonomous driving started. Turn left turn.
We're riding in the back of an autonomous truck. It's about to take a left turn into oncoming traffic. So their sensors...
Intersection clear. Left turn.
It's accelerating on its own, it's braking on its own, it's steering on its own. So trucking in the United States is like a $700 billion a year industry, and it employs 1.8 million people. Thus far, it's been pretty immune to the changes of globalization and technology, but that's about to change with technology like this.
Left turn. Entering highway.
There's an operator here, there's a safety engineer here, because they're still experimenting, it's still kind of in development.
Speed limit 65.
Have you put your hand on the wheel at any point? I don't know. This is like a pretty complex traffic situation. There are cars merging, there are cars passing us. This truck is changing lanes to go around slow traffic, anticipating when people are stopping. And honestly, I just like kind of can't believe it. It's driving itself, and it's doing a pretty good job.
Right turn.
Here we go, making our right turn into our driveway.
We recognize that this is a highly disruptive technology on the order of 10 million people, and displacing rapidly that many people would have a dramatic societal impact. We certainly don't want to see that. We're not targeting that. We're focused on relieving a shortage. But what we're hoping is that there will be a natural evolution into the jobs of the future, just as there has been in every other technological change.
What do you tell a trucker?
We try not to tell truckers things, we try to listen.
This is Chuck.
Hello, Chuck.
Chuck runs a company that is developing and is going to produce self-driving trucks that are autonomous, that do it themselves. You guys are truck drivers?
Yes, sir.
How do you feel about it?
The truck doesn't have a driver in it. Somebody at headquarters is sitting behind a monitor.
No, there's a driver in there.
No, in the future, when there isn't, once it's fully tested and we don't need to have a driver in the
driver
vehicle.
assist.
No, it's not driver assist. It is purely self-driving.
So like a GPS, basically, you're going from point A to point B.
There's GPS in it. There's a lot of tech, but GPS is a part of it.
Okay.
He took me into one of his trucks today. We did like a 90-minute run up and down I-10. Traffic was merging in, it was changing lanes, it was braking, it was accelerating, it was like...
So does it do really good when the cars cut you off?
A car cut us off. And you know what? It didn't slam on the brakes. The truck just kind of kept rolling.
How's your equipment handling the high winds?
We're actually surprisingly good in high winds.
How much weight in the trailer?
We've gone empty and loaded.
Empty and loaded?
Yes, sir. We have very complex control algorithms, and now we hold it with such precision that it is perfectly straight. It's tough.
You seem pretty impressed.
Actually, yeah, I am. I wasn't all for it, but I mean, I gotta see this.
That's laser. That's LiDAR. It's a laser, like a laser radar.
What do you love about driving a truck?
Oh, God. I love to drive. Me, it's a privilege. It's a privilege to get out there, get behind the wheel of 80,000 pounds, drive that thing down the road, knowing, hey, you know what? I can do this. You can't do it.
No, I can't.
And I know I'm providing the U.S. I'm providing the world with whatever I got on the back of my freight. I deliver your clothes, your food that you're eating. A lot of people don't see that. And it's a good feeling as a driver, as a human being. You really got to have faith to rely on, is this going to kill me or?
Yep, and we'll have to do a lot of testing to prove that.
All right. That's definitely different.
Over the next year, we're building a fleet of 200 trucks, and we're going to be operating them day and night just to validate it, to prove it. We have to prove to you, we have to prove to the regulators, to the states, we have to prove to ourselves.
When you ask me what would I do if I didn't drive, I can't honestly answer that because I really don't know what I would do. I'd be scared.
Well, we know that these completely driverless vehicles will soon be all over this stretch of Chandler Boulevard. We're here at 56th Street in Chandler Boulevard, where we've seen several of them every few minutes here tonight, and very soon there will be no one behind the wheel. A typical sight in the East Valley, white Waymo driverless vans picking up riders with someone monitoring the technology from the front seat. But soon, according to an email sent to Waymo customers on Thursday, the humans are being phased out, saying, quote, "This ride will be different. And if you're matched with a fully driverless car, you will see a notification in your Waymo app that confirms the car won't have a trained driver up front. Then saying you can enjoy having the car all to yourself." Of course, a lot of people have opinions about this one way or the other, and we want to know what you think about this tonight. For that, we'll send it back to Mike and Caribe.